I ran my thumb over a polished silver-framed wedding photo. The picture shows us, young, naive, in love. 10 years ago, our smiles in that photo were real, but now I looked at them and didn't recognize myself. I lowered my hand, set the frame on the nightstand, and then, abruptly, in one motion, turned it face down. Our family no longer existed. I stood in the silence of our living room, flooded by the soft light of the setting sun. A thick shadow crept slowly across the hardwood floor, absorbing the last rays of the day. The sound of the door opening pulled me from my bitter thoughts. Elizabeth entered the hallway, her silhouette silhouetted against the still light doorway. She always appeared like this, confident, with a straight back, as if she were the mistress of the world. Today she wore an elegant anthracite-colored pantsuit that fit her figure perfectly. A thin ivory silk blouse was barely visible under the jacket. On her feet, pointy-toed, high-heeled slip-on shoes beat the rhythm of her footsteps on the marble floor of the hallway. Dainty diamond earrings glittered in her ears. Her dark hair was gathered into a severe but sophisticated low bun, emphasizing the precise line of her neck. She exuded the scent of expensive perfume, more intense than this morning's Gucci bloom. Something more tart and deep, perhaps Tom Ford Black Orchid. She passed into the living room without dignifying me with a glance. Her attention was completely absorbed by her phone. She tossed the leather folder carelessly onto the table and began to flip through her email, her slender fingers sliding across the screen. "Hi," I said quietly. She looked away from the phone, gave me a fleeting glance, as if assessing some insignificant piece of furniture, and then returned to her work. Hey. Why don't we order something from Giovanni's? We haven't been there in a while," I suggested, trying to keep my voice casual. "We could have dinner together." "No, thanks. I've already had dinner. We had a big deal at the office today, celebrating." She walked to the back of the room, to her favorite chair by the window, still typing something on her phone. I stared at her focused face, at that armor of style and business success that always separated me from her. "Is this more important than your marriage?" I asked quietly. She looked up sharply, her dark eyes flashing with irritation. "Evan, what are you starting? This is my job. You know how important it is to me. This was a breakthrough, okay? And you realize that today I stammered, not knowing if I should remind her. She sighed, put the phone away, and looked at me tiredly. "Evan, not now, please. I'm really very tired."
When was now, Elizabeth? When was the last time we just sat down together and watched a movie? What is going on between us? We're a couple, aren't we? "I'm keeping an eye on it," she cut him off. "I have a job, you have a job. I stay late a lot, it's true. I need my own space, my own time to focus on my career. That's very important to me." She picked up the phone again, as if putting an end to our short dialogue. I looked at her and realized that a wall had grown between us that was impossible to break down. A wall of her ambition and my humility. "Remember, I'll tell you once," she said sharply, setting the phone aside on the table. "Work is very important to me. Right now, I'm going to take a shower, and when I get out, I expect your interrogation is over." Elizabeth walked up the stairs, her high heels beating out a crisp, confident rhythm. I heard her walk into the bathroom, and a moment later the water rumbled. The shower had turned on. I moved too, as if obeying inertia, and suddenly I heard a quiet, barely audible ringing. Elizabeth's jacket, neatly tossed on a chair, was nearby, and I saw a light flash on the screen of the phone, half sticking out of my pocket. The sounds of water pouring from the bathroom seemed to grow louder. My heart raced, as if trying to burst out of my chest. I knew it was wrong, that it was low, but I couldn't stop. It wasn't just paranoia, it was a premonition that now craved confirmation. I gingerly picked up the phone. My fingers trembled as I entered the password. The date of our wedding. She'd never changed it once in those 10 years. The screen unlocked. There was a message on it. My world crumbled. Missing you already. Last night was incredible. Can't wait to taste you again. Caption: Lance. I sank to the edge of the bed. I couldn't feel my legs, couldn't feel my body. My world had turned upside down. And in the background, I could hear water pouring from behind the closed door, and my wife, my Elizabeth, humming some kind of tune. In that moment, I realized that our marriage was a lie, and that was just the beginning. The next week passed for me in a state of controlled rage. Every morning I kissed Elizabeth goodbye, pretending nothing had changed. Her lips were cold, and I could taste them distantly, as if she had just drunk ice water. My fingers touching her hand didn't tremble. I was calm. I was the perfect husband. Every night I watched her leave for her late-night meetings. I knew exactly where she was going and who she would be spending time with. I saw her texts, heard her laughing softly into the phone, and it no longer surprised me. I just watched, captured her every move, like a cameraman making a documentary about someone else's life, but so familiar. I endured it for exactly 7 days. I waited for my rage to ripen, to become cold and razor-sharp.
Friday night, she came home. She looked happy and peaceful. She was wearing the same dress as last time, and her eyes were shining. There was no guilt in her gaze, only contentment. I waited for her in the parlor. "Elizabeth," I said as she walked past me, "we need to talk." She stopped, her smile gone. She looked at me as if I were a minor obstacle to be bypassed. "Evan, I'm not going to listen to you complain," she said with frank contempt in her voice. "If you want to talk about work, I'm listening." "It'll just take a minute," I said calmly, though I was seething inside. "Who's Lance?" Her face didn't change. Not a shadow of fear, not a hint of embarrassment. She just looked at me. "He's a client of my firm. He's very important to us. What else?" "Is he your lover, too?" I asked, and my voice shook. "Yes," she answered calmly, as if she were talking about the weather. "We're having an affair for 6 months now." I waited for her words, but I wasn't prepared for such equanimity. She wasn't just confessing, she was challenging me. "I'm tired, Evan," she continued, looking me squarely in the eye. "You don't understand. I needed energy, freedom, and you couldn't give it to me. You're weak." Her words were like blows. She didn't just accuse me, she stomped my dignity into the dirt. I stood staring at her, this beautiful, well-groomed, but completely foreign woman. "Do you think it's all my fault?" I asked, and my voice was cold as ice. "That it's my fault that you betrayed our marriage, our life?" "I'm not blaming you," she replied with a slight chuckle. "I'm just telling you that we're different. I've grown out of it." I stood and looked at her. There wasn't an ounce of regret in her words. She was sure she was right. "All right, Elizabeth. Your interrogation is over." I walked away, leaving her alone. I knew I had to do something to make her regret her words. Not just get back at her, but break her like she broke me. I sat in the living room, on the very couch where we used to watch movies. I had my laptop in my lap, and I was going through her correspondence methodically, like I was preparing for a presentation to a big boss. I'd managed to access all of her online services. I took screenshots, copied documents, creating a complete chronology of their affair, every date, every text, every breath she took for him. I thought by now the rage would overwhelm me, but something colder came over me. I didn't feel the pain of physical betrayal.
I had already experienced it when I read that message. The worst part was the way she talked about me. I read how she called me poor Evan, weakling. I read how she made me look like a laughingstock. I was especially affected when she told Lance about our couples therapy, about our attempts to save what appeared to exist only in my head. "He still thinks we can fix it," she wrote. "He sat there and talked about how he felt, said he wanted our intimacy back. I could barely contain my laughter, Lance." And I saw his response. "A man needs to be reliable, but not so much that it interferes with your life. And you need more than that, baby. A lot more, don't you?" "Yes," she answered. "My husband is just too boring." At that moment, I couldn't see the text anymore. All I saw was her face, her laughter, her betrayal. My hand clutched the laptop with such force that I heard the plastic crack. But I couldn't stop. I squeezed it even harder until a thin, spidery crack ran down the screen, right through her avatar. I barely forced myself to let go of the laptop. The screen flickered, but I could see everything. I didn't let my anger overwhelm me. Not now. I needed to think soberly. I sat in the living room staring at the flickering screen with the spiderweb of cracks running across it. The front door lock clicked, and Elizabeth's quiet, whispered voice came from downstairs. I quickly opened a new browser tab to hide the evidence of my hunt. She walked into the living room without noticing me, her eyes fixed on the phone. "I'll call you back," she said quietly, but I heard every word. "See you tomorrow, same time. I miss you too." I clenched my jaws so hard I heard a crunch. I looked at her beautiful manicured face, and I thought, she's using the same words she once said to me, the same words she says to this Lance now. And then it hit me. Does he, this Lance, know that Elizabeth speaks to him in the same phrases she once spoke to me, using the same gestures, the same tone? I didn't know, but I did know one thing. She hadn't just betrayed me. She'd done it with cold calculation, as if I was just a rehearsal before true love. Elizabeth walked into the living room. She was wearing a tight black dress that emphasized her perfect figure. A smile played on her lips, but her eyes remained cold and empty. "Evan, I'm going away for the weekend," she said, without looking at me. "Friday through Sunday, we're having a marketing summit." "What hotel?" I asked, trying to remain calm. "At the Four Seasons," she replied. "All the keynote speakers will be there." I opened the hotel's website on the laptop I had in my lap and scrolled through the calendar of events. No summit was there. "That's funny," I said, "but I don't see the hotel announcing any marketing conference." Her smile trembled a little, but she quickly pulled herself together. "It's a private conference, only for a select few." I looked at her beautiful, well-groomed face, and there was no remorse in her eyes, only annoyance that I didn't believe her lies. "Well, have fun with Lance," I said, turning away from the computer. There was a ringing silence in the room. It was so dense, it felt like you could touch it. I could hear my heartbeat, and I thought she could hear it too. We sat in the same space, but there was a chasm between us, full of unspoken words and dashed hopes. I turned to the computer, and at that moment there was a deafening silence. I could almost hear her draw in air. Her thoughts must have been racing, feverishly trying to figure out what to do. Deny? Justify herself? "What did you say?" Her voice was dangerously quiet. I turned my head and looked her straight in the eye. "Lance, your client you've been sleeping with for the last 6 months. Have fun with him. Spend this weekend with him." Her face went pale. She couldn't say a word. Were you spying on me?" she whispered. I laughed sharply, loudly. The sound, so foreign in the quiet room, startled her. "You were careless," I said, "leaving your phone unlocked, your mail on. I was just following the breadcrumbs you left behind. Any idiot could have done that." "You had no such right," she screamed. "Did you have the right to make a fool of me?" I replied, and there was a coldness in my voice that I didn't recognize myself. "I have every right to know what's going on in my life and what's going on in my family." Elizabeth stepped back, her chin flying up as if she was preparing to take a punch. "Okay," her voice was firm and devoid of any shame. "Yes, I'm sleeping with Lance." "Are you happy?" My voice was quiet, almost a whisper. I didn't want a scandal. I wanted to understand. I wanted to hear why. Why did you ruin 10 years? 10 years of our marriage? Her voice filled the room, every word filled with rage and contempt. She was no longer my quiet, polite wife. She was wild and free. "He makes me feel alive, Evan. When I'm with him, I'm not just someone's wife. I'm not trapped. I blossom. I'm not in this prison of playing family with a man who thinks a date in the park is exciting." Every word she said was like a physical blow, but I didn't show weakness. I just looked into her eyes, and in that moment, I realized that there was nothing left of the girl I once loved in her. "So I'm weak," I said calmly. "Too boring? Not manly enough for you? Do you want the truth?" Her eyes sparkled. "You don't want it." She didn't even answer my question. She just stared at me, and there was so much contempt in her gaze that I felt cold. I stood up. I knew I had to do something to make her regret her words.
"I could never give you the feelings you never gave me," I said. "But I know what you wanted. I know that you wanted me to be the one." She flinched sharply. There was a fear in her eyes that I had never seen before. She realized what I was saying. "How dare you?" she whispered, her voice full of disgust. "You're acting like a hurt boy." Her voice was full of contempt. "Because your wife has found someone better." "Better?" My voice was cold as ice. "Yes, a man who sleeps with married women is better. At least he's not a wuss. At least he takes what he wants instead of asking for attention." Her words were the final brutal blow. Something clicked in my head. I was no longer the passive Evan. I was a man who had been betrayed and whose rage had finally burst out. I walked slowly toward her. She pivoted backward until her back was against the wall. I leaned toward her, and she felt my breath. "Do you think I'm weak, Elizabeth?" My voice was low and dangerous. "You think I'm just going to give up and take it all?" She grinned, but there was an uncertainty in her eyes that I had never seen before. "What are you going to do?" Her voice trembled. "Cry? Beg me to go to a counselor? Face the truth?" Her words were the last straw. I backed away from her. Her face, my expression, was like nothing she'd ever seen. "Get out," I said. She looked at me, not understanding. "Pack your things and get out of the bedroom." My voice was firm and impassive. "You'll sleep in the guest room, or on the couch, or in your car. I don't care. But you will not sleep in my bed. Not with other men. It's my house, too. You want Lance that badly? Then go to him. But don't expect anything more from me. No more support, no more help, no more friendship. As far as I'm concerned, I'm dead to you." She stared at me, her face expressionless. This man with whom she had lived for 10 years had suddenly disappeared, and in his place was someone else. Cold, indifferent, unfamiliar. This sudden change in my demeanor must have stunned her. Then her shoulders straightened, and the familiar mask of contemptuous confidence appeared on her face. "All right, I'll sleep in the guest room. But don't think this little show of strength of yours will make any difference." Her voice sounded mocking. "Weak men forgive and forget. They just give up. And you can do this, Evan, because that's what you always do." She turned and walked away. Her footsteps echoed down the empty hallway. I waited until the door closed behind her. The click of the lock sounded so final that I felt something inside me shatter. I didn't turn back to her. Instead, I turned back to my computer.
My fingers were firm and sure as I created a new email account. I used a fictitious name that no one would be able to link to me, and I chose the most reliable and anonymous service. Then I began methodically forwarding every message, every photo, every piece of evidence I had collected. Our whole life, and now all of her lies, were in front of me. She thought she knew me, thought I was weak, that I would give in. But she didn't. She couldn't predict what I would do next. My reaction was a variable unknown to her. The dawn was gray and cold, completely matching my mood. I began the morning by methodically clearing the bedroom of all traces of Elizabeth. Her perfume, her collection of expensive clothes, her jewelry that she loved so much. I boxed everything up as if I were removing a long-dead part of myself. Each item I removed was like removing a tumor, like getting rid of a diseased body part. I moved everything into the guest room. By dinner time, while she was out, there was nothing left in our bedroom to remind me of her presence. When she came back and saw me taking our wedding picture off the wall, her face contorted with anger. "What are you doing? You're acting like a teenager," she shouted. I didn't pay any attention to her. I just kept taking our pictures off the wall. She slammed the door to the guest room and then the front door, leaving me in silence. Late that night, as the house fell into total darkness, I began to prepare my response to her betrayal. In the light of my laptop's flickering screen, I looked like a surgeon preparing for surgery. I sat in my living room, the glow of the screen falling across my face. I worked through the night, creating new anonymous accounts, archiving documents, copying messages, photos, screenshots, every piece of evidence I had collected. All of it I was transferring to secure cloud storage. The more I dug into her correspondence, the more a horrible picture opened up to me. She wasn't just physically cheating on me. She was sharing intimate details of our lives with Lance. My personal problems, my insecurities, our financial difficulties were all fodder for their conversations. They made fun of me. They did it cruel and ugly. It wasn't just cheating. It was total betrayal. I sat in the dark living room, and the glow of my laptop screen was the only light. I forced myself to read, despite the nausea that was surging up my throat. I found their correspondence where Elizabeth talked about our therapy. "You won't believe it," she wrote. "He actually cried during counseling. Can you believe it? He talked about how he missed our emotional connection. Oh my God, I felt so bad for him." My fingers clenched on the mouse, down to the white knuckles. I could feel a cramp cramping my hand, but I kept reading. "Sounds like your husband needs his balls back. Good thing you found a real man." Every message, every word, even every letter in their correspondence strengthened my resolve. My heart hardened against any remaining sympathy left in me. I felt no more pain, only cold, burning hatred remained. The next morning was as gray and cold as my mood. I no longer felt anger, only cold determination. My path lay to the bank.
I walked up to the teller and asked for half of our shared savings to be transferred to my personal account. The teller raised an eyebrow in surprise but quickly completed the transaction. "Mr. Miller," she asked, "is there anything else I can help you with?" "Yes," I answered, pulling up my phone and showing her the screenshots of Elizabeth and Lance's correspondence. "I would like confirmation that the transfer of these funds was made after I discovered my wife's infidelity, in case of divorce proceedings." The teller's face changed. The professional smile was replaced by a sympathetic expression. She silently took my passport, checked the data, and, carefully writing the date, time, and reason for the transfer, signed as a witness. Upon returning home, I immediately went to the office of the divorce attorney. He listened carefully to my story and immediately got to work. I handed him my phone, and he, plugging it into his computer, began documenting every text message, every photo, and every screenshot I had collected. "The more evidence you have, Mr. Miller, the stronger our position will be," he said as he continued copying files. I grinned grimly. I had plenty of evidence. The weekend came to an end. Sunday evening, Elizabeth came home, a tired smile playing on her face. She found me in the living room, completely absorbed in the basketball game. "Evan, if you're ready, we can talk about this rationally," she said. I didn't even take my eyes off the screen. "There's nothing to discuss, honey. You made your feelings clear." Elizabeth recoiled, confused by my indifference. "What is this? Are you just going to ignore me?" I turned my head, my face impenetrable. "No, love. I'm going to make it much worse," I said, and there was a coldness in my voice that I didn't recognize myself. "I'll show you how much." She grinned, but uncertainty flashed in her eyes. "Are you threatening me?" "No, just promising." Elizabeth opened her mouth to say something, but the tone of my voice cut her off. She left without another word. I finished watching the match, but my mind was on something else. She had destroyed our marriage believing I was too weak to respond. She burned 10 years of trust and devotion for the sake of a few hours. Now, I would burn her entire world. Near midnight, I began the first phase of my plan. I opened my laptop and got to work creating a detailed spreadsheet that covered the last 6 months of her life. I matched her work commitments with the hotel receipts I found in her email. I worked methodically, like an investigator gathering evidence. The pattern was clear. Every conference and late meeting was connected to the hotel. Table reservations, dinners for two. She used our shared credit card to pay for her affair. Dinners at expensive restaurants, trips, nights in luxury hotels, all paid for from our joint account. She paid for her affair with our money, my money.
I documented every bill, every receipt. That evidence was another nail in the coffin of our marriage. It wasn't enough for me to just leave her. She hadn't just broken the marriage vows, she humiliated me. She treated my love and devotion as weaknesses to be taken advantage of. At that moment, my laptop beeped, reporting a new email. The divorce attorney had sent me preliminary documents along with an asset division strategy. There was an oppressive silence in the house, broken only by the quiet tapping of the laptop keys and the barely audible crackling of the old hardwood floor beneath Evan's feet. Even the walls of the house, that had witnessed so many years of their life together, seemed to sigh. Amidst this heavy silence came the occasional muffled vibrations of Elizabeth's phone, which lay in the next room. Each new notification, surely from him, from Lance, seemed to stab Evan in the heart. They were probably plotting their own plans, confident of their impunity, thinking they had circled the weak husband. They laughed at him, shared his weaknesses, enjoyed their secret power. But they did not know that in that silence, under the flickering light of the screen, his answer was being born. With every minute, with every proof he found, his resolve grew stronger. By dawn, on the hard drive of his laptop lay a crushing dossier of betrayal. It was a meticulously documented history of lies, cheating, and humiliation.
Elizabeth thought she knew him. 10 years of marriage, it seemed, should have taught her to predict his moves. But she had no idea what a man pushed to his limits was capable of. She would find out how wrong she'd been. But this was only the beginning. The first rays of the cold sun streamed through the windows, casting light on Evan's face. He slowly closed his laptop. The man who had begged his wife to pay attention to him, who had suggested couples therapy to save their marriage, was gone. In his place was someone Elizabeth didn't know. Someone who would show her how much damage a weak man could do if taken to the extreme. He stood at the window, stretching. His body, stiff from a sleepless night, was aching. Outside the glass, the city was coming to life. Joggers and brightly colored sportswear ran past houses. People walked their dogs. Cars crept slowly in the flow of morning traffic. None of them realized that behind the facade, in the Miller family's perfectly manicured home, war was about to break out. The woman had traded 10 years of marriage for 6 months of thrills, and now she was about to learn the true cost of her decision. By the time Evan was done, she'd realize how badly she'd underestimated her husband. I sat in my car, parked on a street downtown. 3 weeks of methodical research had brought me here. My hands rested on the steering wheel. I watched people, like ants, enter and exit the glass doors of the skyscraper. I knew that behind one of those doors was the one who had ruined my life. I got this information from Elizabeth's messages and what she described her visits. Her messages were full of hints, and like an experienced hunter, I followed in her footsteps. In recent weeks, I played the role of the perfect husband who accepted her infidelity. I even started leaving the house in the evenings when she pretended to go to the gym or to a friend's house. I was actually making a minute-by-minute schedule of her life and her lover's life.
I got a text from Elizabeth. "Sorry I'm running late. Lots of work." I puckered my lips, typing a reply. "That's okay. Take care of yourself." She had no idea I knew where she was. And then I saw him. He came out of the building, tall, confident, wearing an expensive suit that accentuated his figure. He had an expensive watch on his arm and a clipboard in his hand. He was the living embodiment of everything I hated. My hands clenched on the steering wheel. I could barely contain myself. "Enjoy it while you can," I thought to myself. At that moment, my phone rang. Her number popped up on the screen. "Hi," she said. "I forgot to tell you that I have a conference in Boston next weekend." "Sure," I answered, keeping my tone neutral. "How long will you be gone?" "Friday through Sunday," she replied. "I'm sure the firm covers all of that," I said before hanging up. Lance turned the corner, and I followed him. He was a man of habit. Lunch at the same time, the same restaurants. He was predictable, and that was his weakness. And I was ready to use that weakness against him. I followed Lance's car at a safe distance, covering myself with the flow of traffic, which was perfect for staying undetected. We drove toward the center of town. After half an hour, he turned into the parking lot of an upscale French restaurant called Le Ciel Étoilé. I parked across the street, watching. A few minutes later, a familiar black sedan pulled up next to his car. My heart clenched for a moment. It was her. Elizabeth stepped out of the car, and her smile was one I hadn't seen in a very long time. He stepped out to meet her, and they exchanged a long, tender kiss before entering the restaurant. I felt a pang of pain shoot through me, but I immediately suppressed it. I wasn't that person anymore. I pulled out my hidden video camera and took a few shots of their greeting. It was another piece of evidence, another nail. I documented their every move, every encounter, every message. I had to understand their goals, their weaknesses, their pain points. At that moment, my phone rang. It was my old friend, the investigator who was helping me with the information. "Files in your mail, Evan. Found everything you asked for," he said, and I heard a note of surprise in his voice. "This guy has an interesting past." I opened the file. File on Lance Pierce, 38, Senior Investment Manager at Sterling Capital. Marital status, divorced.
no criminal record, financial situation, high income but also significant debt, past history of heavy gambling addiction. There are no ex-players, I thought to myself. He's just learned to hide it. He has a taste for married women, and she has a blind pursuit of thrills. She'd become attached to a man whose carefully polished exterior concealed such significant flaws. Couldn't she see that? Or did she not care? My attention was drawn to the loud cheers coming from the restaurant. I looked at them through the window. Elizabeth was touchingly gentle. She was laughing in a way she hadn't laughed with me in years, and her hand was gently touching Lance's arm. But I felt no pain, only determination. Let them laugh. Let them think they were untouchable in their little bubble of adultery and deceit. I had plans for both of them. My phone vibrated again. It was an email from the lawyer. The divorce papers were ready. Everything was ready. I could make my move. She thought she'd broken me, that she'd turned me into a passive observer. She didn't realize she'd taught me to see things differently. I opened the notepad on my phone and began writing down the next phase of my plan. I recognized their schedule, their weaknesses, their pain points. Now it was time to exploit them. Lance's gambling history was intriguing. I knew that people like addicts often have deep fears, fear that their past would be exposed, especially in a professional setting. The darkness was thickening. I watched them finish their long dinner, paid for with my money. Soon they would learn the true cost of their affair. But not now. For now, I would continue to watch and plan. After all, revenge, like fine wine, requires careful preparation. He was at home when his computer beeped, reporting an email. It was an email from his wife's corporate server. His anonymous report of inappropriate behavior in the workplace had triggered an internal investigation. Everything was going exactly according to his plan. The HR director's response met all his expectations. "Thank you for bringing your concerns to our attention. We take allegations of inappropriate relationships between employees and customers very seriously. Rest assured that the matter will be handled with the utmost discretion." There was a quiet knock on the door. "Come in," he said, without looking up. Elizabeth entered. Her usual self-assuredness was noticeably diminished. "We need to talk," she said. He continued typing, without taking his eyes off the screen. She closed the door behind her and stepped closer. "Someone sent pictures of me and Lance to my firm's human resources department." Her voice shook. He looked up slowly. His face was impenetrable. "Really? And how are they handling this issue?" "It's not funny." She paced back and forth, gesturing with her hands. "They're starting an investigation. I could lose my job." "Sounds serious," he replied, and there wasn't an ounce of sympathy in his voice. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you slept with a client." Her face flashed. "You did it! You did it! I knew you were up to something. You're trying to get me fired because I found someone better." He slowly stood up. "Better. Let's talk about better, honey." He walked over to the table. "Let's talk about debt. About a man who's been sued twice by former business partners. You want to talk about that?" Her eyes widened. "What are you talking about? Didn't your lover tell you about his past? About the millions he lost at the casino that he's still paying off?" He pulled out a folder and tossed it on the table.
Did he mention his secretary too? Or do you think you're special?" Elizabeth's voice trembled. "No, Lance isn't like that. He would have told me everything." He laughed, and that laugh was colder than ice. "You threw away 10 years of our life together for a man who's exactly like you." She grabbed the folder, and her hands shook as she started flipping through the pages. In the folder was a private investigator's report and a picture of Lance leaving the hotel with another woman. It's a fake," she screamed, throwing the folder to the floor. "You made this up to hurt me. Why? Why are you doing this?" But he didn't answer, just looked at her with a cold smile. He grabbed her by the head and pressed her against the door. She cried out in surprise, and then her eyes filled with terror. "You thought you knew me," he hissed. "You thought you knew how I would react. A weak, passive husband who would eventually forgive and forget?" Her breath caught. For the first time, real, genuine fear flashed in her eyes. "That man is dead," he continued, lowering his voice to a dangerous whisper. "You killed him the moment you decided to betray everything we'd built together. And the man who replaced him is far from forgiving everything." "Are you threatening me?" Her voice trailed off into a scream. He stepped back, smiling coldly. "No, I promise. When I'm done, you'll realize how badly you underestimated me." He walked back to his desk and sat down as if they'd just been talking about the weather. "I want you to prepare a good explanation for HR. These pictures are just the beginning." "You're out of your mind!" she screamed. "No, I'm just not who you thought I was anymore." She sprinted out of the room, and the file on Lance slipped from her weakened hands. The pages scattered across the floor like a flock of disheveled birds, symbolizing the utter chaos he'd just brought into her life. He walked to the door, waited for Elizabeth's footsteps to subside in the hallway, and then returned to the table. It was time to move on to the next step. He pulled out his phone and dialed the number he'd memorized weeks ago. There were 2 beeps before a gruff voice answered. "Lance Pierce?" Evan asked. "Yes," Lance answered. "My name is Thomas. I'm from the compliance department. We need to discuss some issues regarding transactions in your accounts and those of your clients." There was silence on the other end of the line. Lance couldn't utter a word. He was so shocked he couldn't even breathe. "What transactions?" he whispered, trying to keep his composure. "I think it's better to discuss it in person," Evan replied. "Let's meet at 8 tonight at the Blind Pig." "I'll be there." "Come alone," Evan added. Evan knew that his gambling addiction and affair with a married woman made him the perfect target. Any mention of financial shenanigans could make him panic. Evan had carefully chosen the place for the meeting. The bar was secluded, with private booths and minimal security cameras. It was the perfect place to corner his prey. Lance was about to find out what kind of predator he had awakened when he decided to stalk a married woman. The Blind Pig bar lived up to its name. Dim lights, dark wood, heavy leather furniture. Everything here was designed to harbor secrets. The secluded booths, separated by high backs, provided perfect privacy. I arrived early and took a seat in the farthest corner where I could see the whole room, but no one could see me. I quietly sipped my whiskey, waiting. At precisely 8 o'clock in the evening, Lance appeared at the door. He quickly looked around the room, searching for Thomas, and when he saw me, he came to the table. "Thomas?" he asked, holding out his hand. "Lance," I answered, without getting up. "Have a seat." Lance sat down across from me, embarrassed. "Now, what transactions were you talking about?" He tried to keep his tone professional, but there was nervousness in his eyes. I took another slow sip of whiskey. "My name is Evan Miller," I said, looking him straight in the eye.
and I'm not from the compliance department. Lance's face, which had just been tense, was now a mask of horror. He began to back away slowly, preparing to flee. Is that you?" he whispered. "Yes, it's me. The weak and passive husband that you and Elizabeth were laughing at so merrily." He jumped to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. He was ready to run. "Sit down," I said calmly, and there was a coldness in my voice that made him stop. "I'm going to talk to you about your actions." Lance's chair remained lying on the floor. He backed up, but I was faster. I blocked his path, and he stumbled back into the chair. "Are you looking for an apology?" he mumbled confusedly, trying to maintain some semblance of dignity.
An apology from the man who called me, and I quote, "a pathetic wuss who needs his balls back?" I laughed, and the sound was foreign even to me. "No, I don't want your apology. I want something completely different." I hit him. The first punch went straight to his nose. I hit him again and again until he fell to the floor. I hit him, and in my head I heard his voice, his laugh, his words to my wife. "Did you think I was weak?" I growled, shaking the file in front of him. "What about your debts, the millions you lost at the casino, your gambling addiction? What about your secrets that you're so careful to hide? I know everything about you, Lance." That's when the bartender turned around to hear the noise. But it was too late. It was over. I was breathing heavily, standing over him. He was whimpering on the floor, his face bloody. I grabbed him by the collar and lifted him up so he could look me in the eye. "You're going to disappear from her life right now," I said. "No goodbyes, no calls, no meetings, no explanations. You just write her one message: we are breaking up, and disappear. Otherwise," he whispered, "otherwise all your clients will know about your past, or else the board of directors will see documents about your financial fraud and gambling addiction," I said, dropping the folder to the floor. "This is my home, Lance, and this is my family. You meddled in it, and you're going to pay for it." I let go of him, and he fell to the floor, pale and intimidated. I was breathing heavily. I bent over him and whispered, "Remember this moment the next time you think of courting a married woman. You have 1 hour," I said, "to disappear from her life. If anyone ever finds out about what happened in that bar, I'll make sure everyone sees the video of you in the conference room with your secretary. I have that video." I adjusted my jacket and walked out, leaving him groaning on the floor. Meanwhile, Elizabeth was waiting for her evening call from Lance as usual. Instead, her phone vibrated. It was a short message. She stared at the screen, unable to believe her eyes. Lance never failed to return her calls. He'd never been cold. She tried to call him back, but he didn't pick up. During the night, Evan began the final act. Her fingers froze over the keyboard. On the screen was a list of her closest friends and coworkers. The letter he'd drafted contained only carefully selected evidence: photos, receipts, and her own cruel words. With each copy sent, his revenge grew closer. Elizabeth's morning began with bewilderment. She called her best friend, but she dropped the call. This was followed by other unanswered calls and a few cold emails from coworkers. Her world that she had so carefully constructed was crumbling by the minute. Everywhere she went, she was looked at judgmentally. She realized everyone knows about her cheating, her betrayal, her cruel words in which she mocked her husband's pain. Finally, she couldn't take it anymore. Enraged and terrified, Elizabeth stormed into his room. The phone trembled in her hand, and her eyes were full of tears.
"What have you done?" she screamed. Evan slowly looked up. There was nothing but calm certainty in his gaze.
"You wanted a thrill," he said, and his voice was quiet, but that made it even more frightening. "Here they were. You got them. I found out about your affair, and now everyone knows about it." "You will answer for it," she screamed. "I'll hire the best lawyer. I'll sue you for everything you've done." Evans smiled slowly. "You think you have enough money for that? Look at our joint account." She rushed to her phone, typing in the passcode with trembling fingers. Her eyes widened when she saw the empty balance. 0. He'd transferred all the money. The most dangerous predators are those that wait patiently in the shadows. They watch, study, and plan their attack. His gaze was cold and full of boundless power. She stared at him, at the man she had thought weak and passive, and in that moment she finally realized how wrong she had been. The next day, a new mailing came with new evidence of infidelity. Elizabeth's world was shattered. As she walked down the hallway of her office, she heard whispers. Her coworkers' looks were full of professional disappointment rather than personal condemnation. The corridor seemed to her like a march to the gallows. There were hundreds of eyes staring at her. When she was summoned to her office by the principal, she tried to resist. "I can explain everything!" she shrieked. "Explain what, Elizabeth?" His voice was dry and cold. He pointed to the monitor. On the screen was a list of claims. Unacceptable customer relations, misuse of company resources, and possibly explicit photos taken in our conference room. Our firm has millions of dollars in revenue, and your reputation is jeopardizing the company's name. You're in breach of contract. There is no room for negotiation here. He handed her the termination papers. "We'll pay you the balance. Pack your things. Security will escort you out." She tried to plead with him about being kept, demoted, a pay cut, but he was undeterred. "It was all written in the contract. You violated it. No court will side with you." Under the icy stares of her former coworkers, Elizabeth folded her belongings. Each item that fell into the cardboard box seemed like a tombstone on the grave of her career. Expensive pens that had once symbolized her status now rolled helplessly across the bottom. The photo frame with her smiling face, still full of ambition and faith in the future, lay next to the diary, written in plans that would never come true. The rustling of the paper, the sound of the Scotch tape she used to seal the box, seemed deafening in this tension-filled silence. She could feel the stares burning into her back. In each of them, she read not schadenfreude, but rather squeamishness and disappointment. Yesterday, she was a successful businesswoman. Today, she was just a shadow, an outcast. Gathering the last of her change, Elizabeth lifted the box. The heaviness of its contents was nothing compared to the weight on her heart. She glanced around her former office, now an alien, soulless space. There was a lump in her throat, and tears stung her eyes, but she wouldn't let them spill. She would not show them her weakness. With her head held high, but her heart broken, Elizabeth walked out of the office, accompanied by a silent guard. Every step she took echoed the resounding end of her former life. The box in her hands was the only thing left of the 10 years she had given to this company, the woman she had once been. Getting into the car, Elizabeth placed the box of belongings on the passenger seat. At that moment, her cell phone rang. She had gotten a text from her best friend, Jessica. "How could you? Talk about his private words in therapy? Use that against him? It's not just cheating anymore. It's cruel and disgusting. I don't know you like that." Immediately, another notification came, this time from her sister. "Mom is crying. Dad can't talk at all. He's so ashamed. I hope your affair was worth it because you ruined our family." Her hands trembled as she tried to call Lance. His number was still disconnected. In desperation, she dialed his office number.
"He's received a job offer in Denver and has traveled there immediately," said the cold female voice on the other end of the line. She dropped the phone. All she could do was stare at the box of her belongings and the empty seat next to her. "Damn you, Evan," she whispered, and there was pain and despair in her voice. She had lost everything, and now she had to deal with it all alone. She noticed another message. It was from Evan's lawyer. Attached was a file of divorce papers. She opened it, and what appeared before her was an elaborate, hard-edged legal document in which every offense she had committed, every lie she had told, every infidelity she had cheated on was neatly documented. It wasn't just a divorce. It was the complete and unequivocal collapse of her family laid out on paper. She sat on the couch in her new, empty apartment. There was nothing around but cardboard boxes, not yet dismantled. The neighborhood was unfriendly, not at all like the luxurious and safe corner she had lived in with Evan. The silence was broken by a phone call. It was her mother. She hadn't heard from her in 3 weeks. "How could you, Elizabeth?" Her mother's voice was full of pain, not anger. "Your father had to leave church this morning. Everyone's talking about those messages your husband sent."
"A mistake is when dinner burned," her mother replied. "And what you did is—" The connection broke. She was alone, in an empty apartment, with an empty life. Suddenly, there was a knock on the door. The sound echoed through the empty apartment. Elizabeth, as if in a trance, rushed to the door. On the threshold stood a courier with an envelope in his hands. "A letter for Elizabeth Miller?" he said. She took it with trembling hands, recognizing Evan's familiar handwriting. She tore open the envelope, and her gaze slid over the lines. "Elizabeth, you have gotten everything you so desperately wanted. Freedom from our marriage, from 10 years of loyalty and devotion, all for a few months of thrills. You thought I was weak, that I was a pathetic wuss who would eventually forgive and forget. You thought you could ruin my life and get away with it. You underestimated me. Enjoy your new life. Word on the street is the 5th Street Diner is hiring waitresses right now. You paid for your mistake with everything you had." The letter fell out of her hands. On the floor, among the empty boxes, it seemed another bitter irony of fate. Evan stood in the empty house. The bare walls reflected the sunlight, leaving only dark nail marks where pictures had once hung. Everything that reminded him of his past life was gone. Only his laptop and a single envelope lay on the table. At that moment, his phone vibrated. A message from his lawyer. "Divorce is finalized. The papers have been signed. You are officially free." A faint smile appeared on his face, a smile of triumph. He opened the laptop. Encrypted emails confirmed that all his plans had been realized. New identity documents were waiting for him in the safety deposit box. A secure account was opened, and a new job under a different name was found. He was leaving this town for good. Evan took the envelope from the desk, walked out the door, and slammed it behind him. The man he was gone. Spending 10 years here hadn't gone to waste. His personality, which Elizabeth thought was weak, had dissolved. Now he would live as a new person. To the rest of the world, he simply ceased to exist.